All right. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's Wireside Chat. As you know, the Wireside Chats take place on the second Monday of every month. This Monday, I'm Paul Woodcover. I'm the Associate Dean of the Online MFA here at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm joined tonight, very thrilled to be joined by Jeremy Flagg, who some of you may know is an instructor here. He's been publishing dystopian and science fiction novels since 2006. In 2020, he branched out into superhero romance under the pen name Ryder O'Malley. Now he has published 20 novels and numerous short stories. He has been in the education field since 2012, teaching a mix of creative writing and graphic design. During the pandemic, he left his day job and now works as a full-time writer and book cover designer. Welcome, Jeremy.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. The reason that I invited Jeremy, I have wanted to have Jeremy as a guest on Wireside Chat for quite some time, but he mentioned to me a few months ago when ChatGPT first came out and everybody was going kind of insane over it. Not that they're not going insane over it right now, but he mentioned some things to me that struck me as very interesting. I realized that he would be a great person to have on here to talk about the implications of this new technology for writers and artists, both from a practical standpoint, maybe even an academic standpoint, and also a philosophical standpoint. Like, what does this mean for art? So Jeremy, I'm going to just put you on the spot immediately and ask you, like, what is ChatGPT? And I mean, how does it work? What is it doing?
So essentially, I actually had to look this up earlier. As someone who's been tinkering and toying with it, I was like, I'm not sure how it was actually trained, because that's been a big conversation behind the visual AI. And so I went and looked this up, and essentially what ChatGPT is, and I'm going to say that wrong like 100 times. It's based off what it's called OpenAI, and it's a large language model learning system. And what that does is it's essentially taking copious amounts of data and it is feeding it through essentially the meat grinder, and it is learning from it. And in this particular instance, what it's doing is it's learning language, and it's looking for patterns, for recognition, for um, basically how we function. And then what I found really interesting about it was that that's only the first step. That's only to get the data in there. But it has to go many steps further than that. And what a lot of the articles really delved into is how it used argument-based learning. And what it would do is it would take OpenAI, pit it against itself, and it would slowly teach itself that this was correct, this is incorrect. Well, I challenge this statement. Well, this is why. And so it slowly basically taught itself, not entirely. And then the bigger piece to it was they brought in many people during the development stages of this, and they were the beta testers, I guess, alpha testers. And what they would do is they would say, I want the name of a fast food company and a fictionary fast food company. And it would come back with really bizarre answers. And they would say, no, bad, bad. And they slowly taught it what good and bad is. And we are still actively doing this. And as it's been rolling out, every time we go in and we use a rehash or a retell or whatever platform you're using does to retell it, you're essentially saying those might not have been bad, but they're not good. Dig some more. And when we finally say, like, this is a good answer, it's learned that path for this particular instance. And now that goes back into the big learning machine. So that's essentially what's been going on behind the scenes. And the the big question has been, what was the data they used to train it initially? And this is where things get a little bit proprietary, which is kind of their secret way of saying we're not going to tell you.
Right.
But if you kind of look at the internet as a whole, my mother used to use the phrase, if you don't want people to see it, don't put it on the internet. Unfortunately, the rest of mankind didn't listen, and we are creating Skynet by uploading everything we do. And if you look at a lot of these platforms, I mean, from Facebook on, you don't own what you put out there.
Right.
It's public domain. And so, or the platform you're using. So Reddit, Wikipedia, if we want to get into writing, sites like Fanfic,
Yep.
they're pulling from these public spaces. And if you look at all the information that's on the internet, it's trying to process the internet essentially.
Right. Wow. So I thought that ChatGPT was kind of isolated from the internet, that they were that at least in the terms of like the training of it, so that they were not subjecting it to like, weird posts about, aliens from, on Reddit or something, right? They didn't want to include that kind of information into the data that they were using to train the system on.
So when I went looking for it, because ChatGPT uses OpenAI as its platform base, um, there was a lot of conflicting information, and I read a couple articles today actually from the creators, and thank you, Benjamin, I appreciate that. They already had existing models for a long time, and so when they're talking about it, they're talking about ChatGPT, but they don't seem to go back far enough to talk about the the data acquisition. And that was
Hmm.
the thing that scared a lot of people, was that wasn't being an open conversation. And part of me as a consumer in corporate America, I kind of understand you don't want to give away your trade secrets,
Right.
but what of mine have you been studying here? Like, as a individual human, I'm a little bit scared that the internet is learning from me. Like, am I the best person for that?
Right.
So
Well,
please don't look
I
at my
mean,
Facebook and learn from that.
I think that's a good segue into one of the primary questions. And actually, before I get into this, I want to just remind everybody that the Q&A button at the top of your screen will open a Q&A little section here, window that you can type questions in that we'll be happy to address. But I know that a lot of writers are either salivating at the idea of having some kind of creative application that can write a book for them, or at the idea of collaborating in interesting ways with this new technology. Whereas others are just terrified that it's going to put them out of a job, for example. So, first of all, where do you come down in this controversy, and what do you think about the relative merits of those positions?
So my answer is going to be very weird, and I don't want people to think that I'm being wish-washy and walking down a, well, he won't pick a side. First, for anyone who hasn't seen, the author community as a whole, and while I love them, are very dramatic, almost as much as the fiction we write. Um, it has been very volatile for like the past, I would say, 6 months. It has turned into an either or, black or white.
Mhm.
There's no middle ground to be had. And so regardless of what side you're on, a lot of people have said, like, I'm going to back off because people are seeing their careers be tanked as, if you found out that I was using an AI of any kind, regardless of what it is, people are um, creating these little fan-based armies to tank people's careers. And
Yep.
so a lot of authors who are in one camp or the other, or even in the very wide gray middle, have kind of stepped back from the argument. And so I put this out there with that statement. I was incredibly nervous coming on here to the point where earlier today I was like, wonder if my career could handle this hit. So, but I do think we need to talk about it. So let's do this. Um, Me personally, if you open one of my books, at absolutely no place in any one of my books will you find anything that was written other than my own hands or mouth.
Mhm.
There is absolutely no artificial intelligence anywhere in my books. Now, that's not because I'm against it. I'm actually I'm an early adopter. I will stand in that iPhone line as long as possible to get that device before anyone else. I was pretty early to adopt this and explore it because I really wanted to see not even my writing. I run a cover design business and my business is visual. I create book covers. I don't want to write creative, witty posts. I want someone to do that for me. Well, what do you know? They created a bot. So I was more interested in that aspect. But the 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 line of what has been considered acceptable or not acceptable keeps getting thrown down, and I personally don't believe that that's appropriate. I do think that we should continue questioning ethics and what this means for us as a society, for as a profession, as a creative endeavor. But if it helps you be a better author and it helps you make bank and you become a USA Today's bestselling author, all I want to do is applaud you because you got there. So
Yeah.
for me, I haven't incorporated it yet into my books, and I'm not going to say that I won't, but I'm extremely nervous because Amazon has decided there's this new fun thing that they like to do and tell you that you don't have rights to their copy or you don't have copyright to your manuscript or your story. And they pull your book down without any warning. And they say, prove it.
Yeah.
Um, do you want video of me crying during editing? Like what constitutes proof if I can't get a physical copy to send to the copyright office? So I'm less concerned with a fellow author using it. I am super concerned with Amazon because they have put down their foot about computer generated voices in audio and said no. Well, if my books have AI anywhere in them and Amazon makes that bold statement, am I screwed? Like, do I have to go rewrite? Do I have to disclose? Like, what's the process? So I'm not concerned with it from a creative standpoint. I am concerned because Amazon does kind of control my earnings. So that's a really long-winded answer to say I'm pro AI, but Amazon, you make me nervous.
Right. Well, especially, so many authors are very dependent upon Amazon for their revenue. Any writer that is self-publishing, um, by and large, they are dependent upon that ecosystem, and it's a very whimsical one. Um, what about the idea of copyright that you just mentioned? What about text that is produced by ChatGPT? I mean, where does the copyright uh, adhere to that? Is it with the software itself somehow? Is it with the person that created the prompt that created the product?
I, as of right now, it's the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
We authors, I don't want to ever talk down and say like we're the we get to run amok as everyone else figures out how things work. The visual world took storm first, and so they are going to be tied up in litigation for probably the next decade. So authors, you got a decade. You're safe. But with that being said, be very, very conscious about any AI that you're using, go read the terms of service. And if you are nervous about it, do not use it, because we well know, if you are using a chatbot of any kind or any sort of, I was experimenting with Verb, and they tell you right there that we will use your results to better improve the software, but they don't quite tell you how.
Yeah.
So, and that's what some of these other large companies have in there, Adobe being the big one right now. They put in a little thing for product improvement in their terms of service. And apparently that means they own everything that you want to do and they can build AI off it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, in a way, ChatGPT is another publishing platform, and we all know that there's a long history of different publishing platforms struggling to take the rights away from the writers who use those platforms. I mean, there's been a long kind of back and forth, and like you said, now it's the wild, wild west. There's no real standard. There's no sheriff in town for ChatGPT.
and
I guess
and
I
I'm
did.
sure there are legal battles currently happening,
Oh yeah.
but unfortunately, this one is going to be a much bigger battle with a lot more nuance than I think the visual is going to be. The visual right now is less about the product and more about how it came to be, whereas ChatGPT is less about how it came to be and what about the aftermath. So I think there's going to have to be different, like we're going to have to reinvent our definitions. Like
Yeah.
as simple as the word plagiarism,
Right.
that definition no longer applies. Eventually, we had to incorporate the term self plagiarism, or we had to start elaborating. And so I think we're going to see either retrofitting terms, or we are going to see ourselves having to come up with a new vocab for some of these things. Um, Someone asked, how do you feel about using ChatGPT to prompt for a storybook or ideas, similar to asking people for prompting for art ideas? From Richard. I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name, but thank you. Um, I do it all the time. I literally do it all the time, and not in a. I've never put in. I need a romance book. What's an idea? I'm not to diminish romance. It is my bread and butter right now, but guy meets guy, guy falls in love with guy, some reason pulled apart, some reason get back together, grand gesture, they fall in love. That is almost every romance book.
Yeah.
So I don't need it to do that. There's kind of already that piece in there. But I, and I did use this, I needed a romantic first date in a city downtown that allowed two people to be isolated. I'm not quite date savvy, so I wasn't quite sure, and I didn't want to confess this to my friends, so instead I'll say it to a room full of strangers. Um, I use Notion as my platform, and I just asked it, what are cute date nights at night? And it came up with a evening farmers market. And I was like, that works perfect. That's all I
Hmm.
needed. Evening farmers market, 3 words, and I wrote everything else. So I think idea generation is great. When you get stuck on something like that, it's almost like if there was an author working across the table from me, I would just yell out, I need a date place. And they would yell back. So basically the machine yells at me.
Yeah, there's some interesting questions here. Like Koji has a post in the Q&A about wondering where the legalities lie in terms of plagiarism for, say, using your novel's characters in a bot, or even a fan making bots of your characters and then claiming you stole their ideas. I mean, I can see all of that kind of thing happening. And it's real. I mean, that sort of thing happens now, especially with fanfic. There's always that sort of proliferating promiscuity of like character ownership, right? Who owns this character? Who does it really belong to? Well, I'm going to write about it, and you can too. What one of my favorite quotes as a writer, and it kind of sums up some of my philosophy as a writer, is from the French playwright Moliere, who said, at least as I've read it translated into English, I take what belongs to me wherever I find it. And that is kind of the notion of the artist as magpie, right? And there's no real ownership when it comes to an artist. You take what appeals to you and refashion it for your own use. So how is that different from somebody who's using ChatGPT for an aid in the composition of a story or a novel?
I really don't think there is a difference, to be quite honest. So I use romance a lot because I'm more familiar with it, but you could take this with the hero's journey. You could take this with the three-act structure. You could take this with the horror plot twist, the mystery red herring plot devices. Each of our genres have a structure. And let's be honest, sometimes we just go with them. It is, and even as a professor, when I have a student that's writing a romance, I'm comparing it against the structure because this is the reader expectation. So
Right.
if this bot can understand the reader expectation, do I feel that it's a little bit cheating to get to the knowledge without earning it? Maybe, but that's like my personal, like, I have to do everything the hard way before I learn. So that's just a me way about going for it. Matthew asked, how does it actually work? Great question. This is kind of fun. So again, every AI writing platform will do it a little bit different, but they tell you flat out that the best way to interact with the AI is to treat it like another person. So earlier I was like, I'm rewriting the back blurbs on my books right now, and I just want a little more active tense, a little more punch to some of my word choices. So I mean, I could just use a thesaurus, but I was like, let's see what it does. And you just write in, I'm writing this blurb for the back of my sci-fi dystopian book. Can it be more active? And it just scans it, rewrites it, and it, for me in this case, it only changed like 3 or 4 words, and they weren't good words, but they were words that gave me jumping off point, being like, oh,
Right.
I see where you're looking at. I'm going to pay some attention there. And then I did break out a thesaurus ultimately, but it's great because you can say, I want a space western with a dude taken from the 1980s who's been orphaned in outer space and meets a alien raccoon and a giant plant man. Give me a plot. And it will write you up the very broad beats for it. And funny enough, despite the fact we just described Guardians of the Galaxy, we will all get a different plot.
Right.
So it's like having a conversation with any stranger, which is what I love about it.
Let me surface another question out of the chat here, or rather out of the Q&A. This is from Brian Chapman, who says, the rights question is interesting. As a writer, are you concerned with the data you are feeding it? Are you concerned that the data you are feeding it is being used to replace you and others like you? We don't know what it's training in the background, but it's hard to imagine it's isolated to just ChatGPT. Perhaps it's training future AI writers. I mean, my initial, as soon as ChatGPT came out, I thought, Hollywood producers and executives are just salivating right now because they're thinking like, we can cut the writer out completely. We don't need writers anymore. They're just troublemakers anyway, you know? We'll just like train ChatGPT to write a script for us and we can shoot them and then we'll get rid of the directors, right? We don't need them. And we don't even need the actors because we can use like, computer generated models of famous actors from bygone eras, right?
I do find this kind of funny because there are two type of author. Those that believe that we are heading towards Star Trek The Next Generation and we will have no currency and become one people, or Skynet and Arnold Schwarzenegger
Right.
is going to show up at your door. There's nothing in between. We are all one extreme or the other. Um, I would like to believe that we are moving towards Star Trek The Next Generation, but I've started doing pull-ups like Sarah Connor and I'm ready for this.
Yeah, maybe we have to go through the Terminator to get to Star Trek.
So ultimately, I come from a military family, and once my family left the military, I grew up in northern Maine in a very small town, and my town of 1,200 people, which my section of town was only like 200 people, I could probably tell you the birthday of every one of them, and I could tell you every dirty secret about every person there.
Oh, please do.
So, because of that, like I grew up in this really small, close-knit town, and I left because there was no sense of privacy. But as the internet has kind of flourished, if you use any social media, your privacy has been gone. I I think that privacy has been an illusion for such a long time, and we rack our brains hoping onto it. But you're being stalked and your footsteps are being traced in the grocery store. There's no way around it. And
Yeah.
if they are micro targeting you, by the way, I teach the marketing class, so this is stuff we talk about. Um, if you are being micro targeted in the grocery store, a place we all have to go to, I just feel that illusion is gone. And for me, really, if you want to know something bizarre about me, I'll tell you to your face, because if it's on the internet, I was comfortable. My mother sees everything. She knows every romance book. Like, I talk very openly about what happens in them, and my mother has learned not to go to my Facebook. Um, so I've kind of taken that approach to it, but I do realize that I'm a specific type of person, and those that do still value their privacy, I might just simply say this is not for you. And I'm not saying that that is a bad thing by any stretch, but if that's something that makes you nervous, then I don't want to say anyone is forcing you to use it, but it's got to be within your comfort zone. And I feel that that's what I would say for any tool, whether you're using Scrivener, whether you're using the Oxford comma or not the Oxford comma, not to cause a fight, but we all kind of
We're
established
team
that.
Oxford comma here at the online MFA.
My editor would say I am not team Oxford comma.
Um, I was just gonna, you pushed one of my buttons there with the Oxford comma and then knocked my next question right out of my head. Um, oh, I know what I was going to ask. So, I mean, you mentioned Scrivener, right? And social media, of course. These are all elements of our MFA as we have built it and as we teach it, right? We talk about in various classes like what how do you compose your work? Do you use Scrivener? Do you use some other program that allows you to keep track of plots and of characters and maybe has a picture board that you can use. In the same way, we teach people about the use of social media to advance your career, to publicize your book, to make connections, network, pitch mad and things like that. So why wouldn't we incorporate uh, large language model AI systems into an MFA, for example? Isn't that because won't that be such a ubiquitous part of the publishing and creative writing landscape in the near future that we kind of have an obligation to our students to prepare them for that?
So the I find that for authors, there tends to be a very broad spectrum of, like, I love writing. I do it every day religiously, and but you know what gets me really excited? Selling that book to a reader. I don't
Yeah.
care. When I see that money comes in, that means somehow I marketed it to them. And for me, that's my background. Like I geek out over analytics. Like it's way too much of my job. But there is a vast array of authors that would be like, all I want to do is write a book, hand it over, and be done with it. And unfortunately, that world of author doesn't exist. If you look at Stephen King, he's out there because his publisher urged him to. He's Stephen King. If Stephen King has to be on social media, then what hope is there for the rest of us? E.L. James is on multiple social media platforms, and she'll even say, she's like, I don't particularly like a lot of them, but my publisher asked me to do this. So if they're able to do that, then okay, great. But if they want to just focus on the book, why not hand this stuff off to an assistant? And why does that assistant have to have a body? Laurel King
Hmm.
Hamilton is a great example. She about 5 years ago made an announcement. She was like, I will no longer be the writer of my social media. FYI, I'm hiring someone. They're my social media manager, my content manager. That is their job. My job is to go write books. And she'll she'll jump in, she'll chime in, she'll write posts. But her assistant, who she is very public about,
Hmm.
writes her content in first person. Do I know if her social media manager is screening it by her, getting, like critiqued or whatnot? I don't know. Do I care as a consumer of entertainment? No. I make another fun, pithy post for me. Um, so I think that that really, and for Amber, I 100% agree with you. I love them both. The newsletter was wonderful. Um, but I don't see why that's any different um than having myself do it. And if it makes you a better author because you can spend more time sitting in a chair doing the thing that, quite frankly, a lot of us got into this business to do, then why not?
Yeah.
Um, so, and I kind of look at it like, so I do a lot of graphic design work and I have workflows. Every time I get a client project, I click a button on my computer and I go get some coffee because it's going to run through all the required steps. I created those steps, but they're within the software. It understands what I'm after and it does it. And then my creative role comes into it. So
Do you use in your kind of co-career as a graphic designer and cover designer, do you use AI for that? Do you use like Midjourney or any of that stuff?
absolutely not. And so this is the difference between uh a this all boils down to this really small word called rights. So the if you as a person design your own book cover, you are not selling yourself rights to use this product because as of right now, everything that is created by, let's just go with Midjourney to be safe, because there is ways that you can do this privately using Stable Diffusion, but let's just assume that we're using Midjourney here. If you're doing that, it's public domain. Even if it's private and only you can see it, it's still public domain. So I legally cannot sell you rights. And the problem with this has been when Amazon, and this happened to me this week, one of my clients got dinged. Her book got taken down in the middle of a launch, by the way, and said, your cover is stolen.
Wow.
Oh, oh no, it is not. So I sent the contract like right away and I was like, here, give this to them. And they said, no, it's not enough. So I sent them a video to the faceless Amazon algorithm showing me working on it because I do live screen recordings of some of my stuff. And then they were like, no. what more can I show you that this is
Right.
original work? So then she sent the contract again and they accepted it. I don't know why, but
Huh.
um
So what flagged their system in the first place, do you think? Who
it was
knows?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like there's no rhyme or reason. And Amazon historically has, instead of going into everything with a fine-tooth comb, because computers, AI, mind you, is doing all of this. And instead of, going in with a scalpel, they go in with a sledgehammer. And then it's easier for them to fix the fallout than to not catch the fallout.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this has something to do with lawyers or legal fees, or like they call it reader enjoyment. I, if it's not money driven, then it's not. So um but yeah, and that really all comes down to the word rights. Now, when it comes to writing, I'm not selling it to another person. Now, if I hired you to be my ghostwriter and you submitted to me a AI written manuscript, then we've got a problem because you're
That would be
selling it to
it.
me.
Yeah, and that would be probably be a violation of whatever contract I was under with you
Yeah,
to be your ghostwriter. And I'd like to say up front that I am not your ghostwriter.
I don't know. I got some
Just
superhero
hypothetical.
stories for you.
um, so I guess one thing I keep kind of coming back to when I think about like some of the language that you've learned and or rather used in describing how Chat GPT is operating. I mean, when we talk about this kind of stuff, we're almost forced to anthropomorphize the Chat GPT simply in order to communicate. Like we talk about it learning things, right? But it's not really learning in any. It's learning in a very specialized, like technical sense, but it's not learning in the sense that we learn things that we understand. We like to think that it is. We like to project that onto it, and so I find myself wondering a lot. Um, how much are we like in our training of Chat GPT, like you were saying, bad Chat GPT, bad Chat GPT, good Chat GPT, right? And it refines itself via its algorithms ever more precisely. And ultimately, what we have and what we're looking at is our own reflection in a mirror, right? And we're like, oh my God, we have created sentience, but perhaps we have not. We have just created an incredible image of ourselves.
Okay, so let's compare this to Google's AI. If anyone remembers, a couple years ago, Google released an AI and they put it in like a chat room to learn. And within the hour, it's spouting out hate speech.
Yeah, people turned it into like a racist.
Yeah, so thank you, internet. You're horrible human beings. But I will say one of the really nice things is that OpenAI has been very careful in what it will and won't do. Romance writers, this one kind of screws us over. Try and I dare you to write a romance scene in the boudoir between two of your characters. If my characters as they go into the room for a night of casual lovemaking, like how else are you doing this? And their love between one another and their making of romance. Like I'm not kidding; these are actual words it used. And I was like, by the end of this, it felt like it was a third grader trying to talk about where babies came from. It was hilarious, and I kind of want it to be an actual novel because I'm sorry, if Chuck Tingle can make the Tingle verse work, we can
Right.
make Chat GPT romance verse work.
I'm sure. I'm sure. There's a readership out there for everything. That's one thing I've discovered.
and
Um,
and and I will say, like, the current models are very like they are controlling them, so they are keeping it in a certain parameter, and you'll see this in Midjourney. And Midjourney 5 just came out. Yeah, version 5 came out, and I'm a romance author. I need me some social media images of shirtless men, and if I can't, it is I am currently suspended from Midjourney, I'll admit, because I tried to circumvent the word shirtless.
Okay.
But I get what it's trying to do. It's trying to prevent it from becoming this what happened to Google, and they saw that. And so I do believe that um, I do know that you if you want to go down that road, that's what Stable Fusion
Okay.
can do. But they are controlling it. And so the really high order question that I keep wondering about is we have the Turing test for audio. We have the uncanny valley for a visual. I don't think we have an AI generated test for text. I don't think we have a definition of what that is. And where I've been seeing it, I'm in Discord all day long. We have a superhero Discord server, and we get people who come in and they start acting a little off. Now, to be frank, these are superhero geek fans, and I get we're sometimes very awkward to begin with. And you start to wonder like, are you normal awkward or are you AI awkward?
Right.
And so we have come up with a series of questions to ask new people that are weirdly philosophical, can't be correctly answered. And when you ask them, they start spitting out lewd stuff or violent stuff, or I'm going to come after you and kill you, or they just make memes of my face, which is kind of funny. Um, but we had to come up with tests to kind of vet people because it's gotten so
Well,
sophisticated.
it's so similar to like Blade Runner, right? Where Harrison Ford is doing these bizarre kind of psychological tests in order to identify who the replicants are and who are not replicants. Um,
Brian, you are 100% correct. It used to be that you would see so in Discord we have chat bots that you can hook AI up to and it will do whatever. But they found a way to take user accounts and feed AI into them so they look normal.
yeah.
And I really just think that this is modern day trolling. Like, I don't think it's horrible. We're all adults in my server, so it's not like I have to worry about 14-year-olds and, PG crowd. But there is stuff that comes in there, and they they are very good at consuming things. So, like in my bio, it has links going to like my website and whatnot, and it knows to go to my website, to my Amazon. It pulls my book titles and it will talk to me about my book titles like they read my book. Which,
Yeah.
let's be honest, they always seem to pick a title that hasn't sold in a long time, so I always know that they're lying. But it's creepy that we now have to have a Turing test for text.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I can see it's and it's very difficult to create something like that because you have to be a step ahead of something that's faster than you are. Um, let me surface another question out of the Q&A here. This is from Wei, who asks, if we are to design a course related to writing alongside an LLM AI, what are some of the areas do you think students can really benefit by becoming more AI literate? Writing analysis, novel structure, marketing strategy, something else?
So, highway, glad you could come. Um, the I think that the AI has a really big place in your process, in your production. Now, I I don't think that I don't think I'm gonna be replacing any of my fiction with AI right now. For me, it actually, if any of my students know, I hate editing. If I had a superpower, I want a clean first draft. That's all that matters to me. And if it's not clean, it's got to go to the editor because I don't want to rewrite anything ever. It takes so long and it slows me down and it's just not a thing for me. So I started plotting. Well, what if I had something that would help me with plotting? Well, I went and got Plotter for that. Well, what if I had something that could help me be a little bit better about my plotting and maybe point out my pacing? Awesome. we have that now in Pro Writing Aid. I mean, it unfortunately it has it gets clunky as you get into the 20,000 word and up area, but it will say this part's kind of slagging. And
What is it? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but what is it basing that judgment on? Like
so it is
pace?
comparing you, and this is why the phrase AI is just going to become the new iPhone. Remember when iPhone came out and everything was I this, I that, I. We still have iRobot, I think. Um, AI has been around for many years. It has been around for many, many years. My first boyfriend in college wrote the AI that keeps planes from crashing into mountains. Very important stuff. That was in 99. So AI is just become common vernacular. So in Pro Writing Aid, every time an author compares their stuff, what they're doing is they're doing a word analysis. And to the degree, and I don't know how they're getting this information, this I found out today, there's a setting in Pro Writing Aid, I can go make my book Stephen King compared to Stephen King's writing. I'm not entirely sure that Stephen King gave approval for that. Like that that is the type of issues that I have with it. I'm not going to use it because Stephen King and I aren't exactly similar writers.
Right.
Um, but it's learned that, too many sticky words slows down a sentence. It's learned that my overuse of the word that really needs to be kept in check.
I hear you.
And because all of us have been doing this stuff and accepting or altering, the next time it sees that same paragraph and what we've altered, it remembers.
Hmm.
So we've been training this stuff for many, many years. It's now just that we slap the word AI on it and suddenly it's a new product. Um, so Pro Writing Aid has been great. It's the same thing as Grammarly or AutoCrit.
But I
But
mean,
I've
the thing
no, go
about,
for it.
but I mean, the thing about Grammarly, I mean, I want to don't want to digress too much, but I mean, Grammarly is, at least as far as I'm concerned, in my exposure to it as both a writer and an editor, and actually as an instructor, it's crap. It is not dependable. Um,
Go
and
for go for Pro Writing Aid, the minimum, or if you can splurge the money, I think that AutoCrit is the Rolls Royce of.
well, I'll have to look at it. I'm honestly not familiar with it. But I certainly can see that if something like that is available and trustworthy, there's no reason not to utilize it.
And it's been really great because I don't know if it learns, like, you can create style guides. That's what I was uh, talking to a bunch of authors today about, making a more robust style guide so that my editor can deal with the real problems and not
Hmm.
my inability to add a comma after independent clauses. So, but the same thing, I could run that through AI. There's limits on the words and what it can remember and whatnot. I don't particularly um like I use passive voice, let's just be honest. And suddenly it's like, we detected a little bit too much passive voice. We're going to try and make it active. Whoa, 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 calm down. Like, my readers know me for this. Like,
Right.
um but could that help me be a better writer? I will say 100% the the output from these things has definitely made me a better writer. So I think, back to Wade's question, I think there is a parallel to how we can use AI to improve the things we're already doing, sometimes farm off the things we're doing. But what we tell authors in the MFA program is, you got to learn to walk before you can run. So let's learn the fundamentals before you start shipping them out, because if you don't understand those fundamentals, you won't know what's good and what's bad when it puts that out.
Right.
So I do think that there's, every step of the way, from your editing, from your brainstorming, even the writing, there are options for you. It's just whatever works for your flow and makes you a faster or more efficient writer, or the writer you want to be.
But I do kind of agree with Wei that there has to be, or should be, and probably at some point will be, a place for these sorts of systems in our pedagogy, right? In what we're teaching students, not just in what we're teaching students, but how we're teaching students. Like there'll be a use for this stuff on the student end and on the instructor end. Um, I don't know exactly what it is yet. I mean, I'm very happy to see. I don't know if anybody on this call has listened to Paul LeBlanc talk about ChatGPT and other LLMs, and about the approach that Southern New Hampshire is going to take and is taking towards these new technologies. He's very open-minded about it, and clearly enthused by the promise of the technology, as opposed to feeling like a kind of like knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, this is bad, or oh, students are going to use this to cheat. We've got to shut them down.
Well,
And I
and
think you
I
see that reaction in some places, but you're not really seeing it here, which I find really one of the reasons I like working here.
so in one of the things we were talking about this before, I was in high school during the internet emerging days, when we went from, paying for long distance dial up to actually being able to use the internet for research. And beforehand, back in ye old days, we would get a take home quiz, and it could be multiple choice because let's be honest, the teacher didn't want to grade an essay. They just wanted to use their little bubble sheet and be
Hey,
done with it.
we're just
So they would
human.
send us home with that, but I could cheat so easily. Now, unfortunately, I lived in a place where everyone around me was long distance phone calls, so I couldn't call and cheat. I actually had to do the work. I guess my parents were happy about that. But once the internet came out, that kind of test taking became obsolete. So then you would start seeing students, like we started getting assignments like do a short reply to the following prompts. And they would ask you questions like, uh, in Old Yeller, what is the underlying thematic of uh, the internet didn't know the answers back then. Now
Right.
there's a website for everything. Um, so I feel that not only will the usage of students change, but I think in the education model, I feel that there's going to be a new education loves buzzwords, so I'm always scared about it. But is there going to be a new way of designing tests that are unique to a person? So like instead of asking a factual question, and I love this about the MFA program because there's a lot of personalized philosophical questions being asked, which quite frankly, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your author journey. So however you decide to respond to it, I might not agree with it. It might not be for me, but that's the question isn't a right or wrong. It's a explain, defend, elaborate, explore. And so I think even if we, you know, started AIing those questions and asking that, at that point, are you here to learn or are you just getting a grade? Because at least in the fine arts, it's not always about the grade, it's about the journey and what you learn. Where it makes me nervous is what about that uh, doctoral candidate in open heart surgery is forging, but
Yeah.
then even then they have to go do it. So, or the AI will do the surgery for them. Like, I don't know.
Well, I think that's already happening. I think there is at least fully automated surgeries for some conditions. Um,
Mine, I had to go to an orthopedist the other day, and he he has an automated text reply, like follow up and all that stuff, and it's Chat GPT. They forgot to remove the bracket that said this is Chat GPT,
oh, okay.
and it all it is automating a very polite and casual way of saying I have an upcoming appointment. So okay, like even the doctor found a way to use it, um, which fascinating.
Yeah.
But AI is here to stay. There's no way around it. There's no putting it back in the box. We're seeing legal issues all over the place, which I find extremely fascinating. Like I said, I think the court cases will be going on for many, many years, especially now that Microsoft has bought OpenAI or partnered with OpenAI. I'm not sure what that deal was. But any lawsuits, it's going to be kind of a big deal for a while. The Copyright Office has got their hand in it, but they have to wait for litigation, and all the lawyers right now are all a kerfluffle because they get to be pundits of the legal system. And it's kind of funny because in the visual arts, if this was human on human art, we would call it appropriation. Like there's an entire appropriations movement where you take someone else's art, do something fun with it, and it's yours. And there's a phrase we have called the something of transformation or transformative something. I can't remember the term off the top of my head. Transformative works. So there was a artist on artist. He literally took a photograph of another person's photograph and put sunglasses on him. And it was declared it was transformative. So he was safe.
Yeah, I mean this kind of thing goes back to like Marcel Duchamp and artists like that,
Yes.
right? And Walter
And that's the
Benjamin was
case I
writing
use.
about this kind of stuff like back in the 1920s. The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction was the title of a famous essay of his that really was quite prescient in that every generation people discover this essay anew because it's completely applicable with each new iteration of the technology that comes out.
And what I find terrifying, and no amount of wanting this to be Star Trek will ever calm this for me, is, and I think that this is something that a lot of creatives share, is so I'm not going to get into the visual arts piece of it, but I learned as a painter by reproducing other artists' work, to the point where there is a Van Gogh in my bathroom that you would think Van Gogh painted on my bathroom wall. And that was part of like my final. I would only pass if I could reproduce. So that is something that, reproduction is kind of a process here, but okay, that we find that acceptable. That's how we learn. I like to think of AI as a human being, and I know that that's its own little creepy thing. I'm a sci-fi writer. I want to believe it. We're ex machina waiting to happen. But the sheer volume of learning, and I think that that's what really terrifies it. You and I could go to school for our entire lives, and we will never understand the full intricacies of the human language. But AI can learn it in hours.
Yeah.
So I think that.
Yeah, I often think back to when I was first coming up in the science fiction world, um, say in the early 70s, right? It was possible then to read every work of science fiction that was produced in the United States in a year. I mean, published in a magazine, in a fanzine, in book form. Obviously, that's hasn't been possible for a long, long time now, but it would be possible for AI to be conversant on that level with anything.
And we're seeing authors, and I'll use the audiobook as an example. I have audio. I have multiple narrators who narrate my audiobooks, and they do vastly different jobs, very different approaches, and I hired them for that reason. But I could do AI. I couldn't be on ACX. Okay, so what are those options? Well, I could sell direct, and I could sell direct to the consumer at a lower price. Yet, though it's a lower price, my profit is higher. So, from a business standpoint, that's great. Now, does that mean I will never use a narrator again? oh, I love my narrators. Of course I would hire them, but maybe that winds up being the higher end product or the lower end product. Okay, that's what a lot of authors are doing right now. And this is really interesting. But at that point, are we making the art of narration exclusive to the financial elite? So like those are the types of questions that I really think people need to be asking, not the execution level or the in my computer sitting at my desk level, but I mean, I write sci-fi and I was brought up on things like Star Trek where we have to ask like what does it mean to be human? Blade Runner is by far one of my favorite movies. So like I want to ask those questions here and find out for me what is my definition. And we as a species have not, like, we just came out of a massive trauma event that we all shared together, and now we are watching mankind progress at a speed that we did not think was going to happen during most of our lifetimes. And oh yeah, that was last week.
Right.
So we've been, as sci-fi writers, we've been asking these questions, but I mean, uh 2001 Space Odyssey, let's just be quite frank, they thought that that's what 2001 was going to look like. Back to the Future was supposed to happen a few years ago, or Back to the Future 2. Like, our definition of what sci-fi looked like is much different now. And so we're seeing the curve, and it's like that exponential curve of technology advancing. And so, in I got 40 to 50 years left. Like, are we gonna see the robot wars by then? So like I'm optimistic and hopeful, but I also write Zompox, so I got a bug out bag and I'm ready to go.
Okay. On that note, I'm gonna call it for the night. This has been a fantastic chat, and Jeremy, will have you back at some point, I hope, to continue the conversation because I know we haven't nearly exhausted this topic. I want to thank everyone who attended tonight for joining us. This
Thank you so much,
recording,
everyone. Watching the
I'm sorry.
chat, just you guys are
Yeah.
all aflutter.
No, it's been great. This recording will be available and posted on our YouTube playlist in a few days or maybe a week or so. And I will make sure the announcement for that is dispersed far and wide. So thank you again, Jeremy, and good night, everybody.